She thought a human in chains could be broken before the eyes of the galaxy. But he didn't fight to survive, he fought to be remembered. And when he walked away, no empire ever dared to forget him. The arena of Solkarth trembled under the weight of two. Beneath the fractured glass dome, under the cold violet light of distant twin suns, a killing ground carved into the ruins of a shattered moon stretched like a wound upon the world. At its heart, surrounded by shimmering energy barriers and the bloodlust of a waiting empire, knelt a single human. Barefoot. Shirtless. Chained at the wrists and ankles with electrified iron that sizzled with each shallow breath. Blood dripped in slow trails from a split brow, crawling along the curve of his cheek, staining the dust at his knees. Dirt clung to his skin, mixing with sweat, grime, and the dark splatter of battles fought long before he entered this place. High above, seated on a floating throne of black obsidian, so polished it reflected the fury of the crowd in broken fragments, leaned the queen of the Telari ascendancy. Her skin shimmered pale gold under the artificial starlight. Her gaze, hard as carved gemstones, fixed on the lone figure below. Her voice was soft but carried through the arena like thunder wrapped in silk. Is that truly the last of them? A servant, no taller than her waist, bowed so low his forehead touched the floor. His voice quivered as he answered. Yes, my queen. Found scavenging among the wreckage. He refused surrender. Killed 2 handlers with his bare hands. Her silvered eyes narrowed. Unarmed. Yes, majesty. The queen sipped slowly from a chalice that gleamed like captured lightning, studying the man below. Breathing steadily. Not begging. Not shaking. Interesting. From the shadows of the far gate, 3 warriors emerged. Towering figures, armored in exosuits etched with the glyphs of a dozen conquests. They shimmered under the shifting lights, bodies pulsing with combat serums, engineered not just for victory but for spectacle. Telari elite, each one bred and sculpted over generations for one purpose, to kill without mercy. Each carried weapons of death, monomolecular-edged blades, pulse-tipped spears that could shatter bone in a single thrust. This was supposed to be a formality. The queen leaned back, one hand lazily gesturing, a gesture that sentenced a life to dust. Human designate 73. You are sentenced to death by trial. The words fell heavy, final. Final words. The human lifted his head, slow, deliberate. His face was battered, one eye swollen shut, lips split. Yet there, through the blood and bruises, a grin curled. Not defiance. Not madness. Confidence. A whisper, ragged but clear enough to reach the throne. Tell her to keep watching. A murmur rippled through the gathered nobles. The queen's fingers tightened around her chalice, but she showed no other sign. The 3 warriors advanced, stepping into the killing ground with mechanical precision. The gates clanged shut behind them, cutting off any hope of retreat. The lights above shifted, darkening the arena until only the center remained illuminated. Sand and blood gleamed beneath the spotlight. The human stood. No armor. No sword. Only blood. Only breath. And something else, the glint of something small and sharp clutched in one hand. A broken shard of stone, jagged and crude. The queen had seen 1,000 executions. Rebels who wept. Gladiators who screamed their defiance. Criminals who tried to flee. But this was different. He stood too still, too calm, as if he weren't about to fight for his life, but waiting for the world to catch up to him. The first warrior moved, fast as plasma fire. A spear thrust designed to end a life in a blink. The human shifted sideways, almost lazily, not dodging, baiting. The spear whistled past his ribs, missing by the width of a breath. And then the rock, small, jagged, filthy, came up in a vicious arc. It struck the alien's throat just beneath the helmet ridge. A sickening crunch echoed in the pit. Violet blood sprayed across the sand. The Telari elite staggered, choking. Trying to scream. Fell. Convulsed. Dead in less than 3 seconds. The queen sat bolt upright, her chalice forgotten, crystalline wine spilling unnoticed across the floor. The crowd froze. The remaining 2 warriors hesitated. The human didn't. He moved forward, not with the stiffness of a prisoner, but with the predatory grace of something ancient and terrible. Chains rattled against his skin as he swung low, catching the spear of the second warrior in a coil of iron links. A twist. A pull. The spear yanked from alien hands. An elbow, sharp and brutal, collided with the side of the warrior's skull. Bone cracked beneath enhanced armor. The second Telari dropped to the sand with a dull, wet thud. 2 down. The arena gasped, the sound swelling, uncertain whether to scream or cheer. The human turned, slowly, limping slightly on a blood-slicked ankle. 1 warrior remained. He shifted his grip on the rock, blood caked now along its rough edge. No fear in his movements. No desperation. Only inevitability. The 3rd elite warrior raised his spear, trembling now. Too late. The human threw the rock, a blur of stone and rage. It struck clean between the plates of armor along the spine, burrowing deep. The Telari collapsed mid-step. Dead. 3 elite warriors. 60 seconds. And the only sound in the arena now was the ragged breathing of one bloodied human, standing barefoot in the dust. Still alive. Still smiling. Still holding the weapon that wasn't meant to exist. He looked up at the queen, and through swollen lips, split by violence, he grinned wider and raised the bloodied rock toward the throne. Told you to keep watching. The queen of the Telari ascendancy did not breathe. Tusta Tisich gloss fixated on the blood-soaked sand. Tusta Tisich hearts beat a stuttering rhythm against ribs lined with fear. 3 warriors, hand-picked from the gene forges, engineered for perfection, lay sprawled across the killing ground like broken idols. Armor cracked, blood cooling in the dust, weapons discarded as useless as the pride they once carried. And at the center of it all, a human, chained, bleeding, breathing. The queen gripped the armrests of her throne, fingertips whitening, pulse thundering in her ears. Around her, aides whispered frantic reports, combat metrics, neural readouts, casualty projections. None of it mattered. No algorithm could explain what they had just seen. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't luck. It was something far worse. It was a choice. The human had stood there when the gates closed, his bare feet bleeding on shattered glass, his muscles torn and trembling under chains designed to break even reinforced bone. And he had smiled. Not like a madman. Like a man who had already calculated every move before the first blow fell. The queen's generals stared at the feed, horrified. He's adapting faster than predictive AI models can map, one whispered. He's not reacting, another said. He's anticipating. And that was the real terror. Humans didn't just endure. They evolved. Even in chains. Even in blood. Especially when they were cornered. From the side gates, more warriors assembled. Not 3 this time. Not formality. 30. A full war cadre. Genetically tuned. Nerve-linked. Armed to the teeth. The queen didn't hesitate. She flicked her wrist. A signal. An order. Crush him. End it. Restore the image of strength before it crumbled entirely. The heavy gates groaned open. 10 squads surged into the arena, black armor gleaming, pulse rifles locked and loaded. The human stood where he had always stood. Not retreating. Not posturing. Simply waiting. He shifted his grip on the broken chain still dangling from his wrists. Bloodied fingers tightened around the jagged stone, his entire being coiled like a trap hidden beneath leaves. The first squad advanced in a disciplined formation, shields up, rifles raised. The human moved. Fast. Faster than they expected. He ducked low under the first volley of stun rounds, the energy sizzling inches from his scalp. Sand erupted around him, obscuring vision. He used it. A blur through the dust. One of the soldiers cried out as the chain snapped around his ankle and jerked him from his line. Another stumbled back, rifle knocked from his grasp by a well-aimed piece of shattered spear. In less than 15 heartbeats, the human was inside their ranks. And inside their ranks, shields meant nothing. Training meant nothing. Only survival mattered. He grabbed the edge of a pulse rifle, tore it free, turned it sideways, and rammed it into a visor. Glass shattered, bone crumpled. He pivoted, used a broken spear tip as leverage, and launched himself upward, kicking another guard squarely in the throat. Gurgling. Collapsing. The rest hesitated. That was their mistake. Because hesitation kills faster than any weapon. He struck again. Chain snapping like a whip. Rock flashing like a hammer. Teeth cracked. Armor buckled. Blood sprayed in arcs as beautiful and terrible as war hymns. Above it all, the queen watched. Frozen. Helpless. Her perfect soldiers dying one after another to a human wielding a stone and chains. Not a sword. Not plasma. Not genetic perfection. Stone. And will. The second squad tried to fall back, forming a wall of overlapping shields, a barrier of cold logic. He crashed into them like a tidal wave of feral determination. He ducked beneath the first shield bash, slammed his shoulder into the second, and drove a broken wrist shackle into a weak joint. Screams followed. Pulse rounds sizzled the air, missing wide. Their wielders too panicked to aim straight. And somewhere, amid the chaos, a chant began. Low at first, then louder. A heartbeat. A wordless roar. Because 2 Statistic spectators who came for blood had found something rarer. Something ancient. Something terrifying. Hope. For the first time, they were not cheering the queen's champions. They were cheering the human. He moved like memory itself, a whisper of every ancestor who had ever fought in the mud, in the caves, beneath skies that rained fire and death. He didn't fight fair. He fought free. And freedom was a language these warriors had never been taught to speak. By the time the 6th and 7th squads collapsed into the sand, their armor torn, weapons scattered, the queen realized she had made a second mistake. She hadn't just underestimated him. She had shown the galaxy something it could never unsee. Not a rebellion. Not a threat. A mirror. And in that mirror, every crowned head would see their own execution written in the grin of a bloodied human holding a rock. The Queen's advisors flooded her throne with data. Recommend total energy cage deployment. Recommend orbital strike. Recommend immediate withdrawal. She silenced them with a look. Because no matter how many soldiers she sent now, the damage was done. She had given him a stage, and he had rewritten the ending. At the center of the arena, covered in blood that wasn't his, dragging a length of broken chain behind him like a king's forgotten scepter, the human stood. He lifted his head, met the Queen's gaze across the ruins of her spectacle, and smiled. Again, not with hatred, not with vengeance, with promise. The promise that he was just getting started. The human did not roar. He did not raise his arms in triumph. He simply stood, swaying slightly on battered legs, chains dragging lazy furrows in the blood-soaked sand. His chest rose and fell, each breath a declaration stronger than any anthem. He was not supposed to be alive, and yet he was. He was not supposed to win, and yet he had. The arena of Sulkarth, built to glorify domination, now stood paralyzed, not from fear of death, but from awe of survival. The Queen leaned forward slowly, almost mechanically, as if her body could not quite obey her mind anymore. Her golden fingertips trembled against the obsidian railing. Her throat, once fluid with command, now locked tight with the dry choke of disbelief. This was not rebellion. This was revelation. Around her, generals barked into comms, desperate to recover some semblance of control. Tactical overlays bloomed across holoscreens, deployments, kill zones, threat evaluations. Every model, every simulation, every algorithm returned the same impossible verdict. Survivability, 0%. Threat potential, anomaly. Recommended action, immediate evacuation. And still, she hesitated, because to flee would be to admit it. That the perfect systems they had built, designed to conquer stars and extinguish species like candles, could be undone by a human with nothing but scars, grit, and a piece of shattered stone. The Queen's lips pressed into a thin line. She gestured sharply. From the southern gate, they unleashed it. The maul. The failsafe. One warrior. Not bred. Forged. An apex predator wrapped in armor thick enough to shrug off railgun rounds. Powered by a reactor embedded in its spinal column, armed with gauntlets that could rip tanks apart. 9 feet tall. 1,200 pounds of moving death. The last weapon of the Ascendancy. The arena gasped as the maul stepped into view, seismic boots leaving deep craters in the sand. The human turned to face it, his expression unreadable. No fear. No surrender. Only inevitability. The Queen smiled tightly, regaining a fraction of composure. This would end it. It had to. The maul lowered its head, twin plasma axes hissing to life in its gauntlets. It stomped forward, each step shaking dust from the cracked ceiling above. The human didn't run, didn't retreat. He shifted his weight, flexed his blood-slick fingers, adjusted his grip on the battered chain still dangling from his wrist. The maul charged. The ground shook. The arena lights flickered under the strain. At the last possible instant, the human moved. A twist. A pivot. The maul swung wide, missing by inches. Its own momentum dragged it forward. The human darted inside its reach, impossibly fast for a body so broken, and looped the chain under the maul's exposed knee joint. A jerk. A pull. Not enough to trip it, but enough to stagger its balance. The maul roared, twisted back, and the human was already moving again. He slid under a wild axe swing, grabbed a discarded spear, and jammed its shattered tip into a cluster of exposed wiring near the maul's left hip. A burst of sparks. A howl of rage. The maul swatted backward blindly, catching nothing but air. The Queen rose from her throne now, both hands clenched into fists, teeth bared. No, she whispered. No, but it was happening. Slowly. Inevitably. The maul's movements became less coordinated. Its right leg dragged slightly. Its swings grew wilder. The human circled it like a starving wolf around a wounded giant. Every breath measured. Every step calculated. Every moment a quiet promise. I will bring you down. The maul lunged again. The human let it come. At the last second, he threw the chain into the maul's faceplate, a blinding distraction, then ducked low and slammed his shoulder into the weakened hip. The maul staggered. One knee buckled. The arena shook with the impact. The human moved fast, wrapping the chain around the maul's other leg, anchoring it to a fallen support beam half buried in the sand. The maul tried to stand, tried to rise, but physics, betrayal, and one human's impossible will dragged it back down. The plasma axis sputtered out, systems failing under internal feedback. The maul collapsed onto its side with a sound like the ending of an empire. Silence. Total and complete. The human stood over the broken weapon of a broken dynasty, chest heaving, one hand bloody and shaking, the other still clutching the stone. The queen pressed her hands against the cold glass of her observation tower. A monarch, a warlord, and for the first time in her reign, utterly powerless. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, billions watched as a human, chained, barefoot, bleeding, brought down the mightiest construct of war with nothing but stone, steel, and the refusal to die. And as he turned slowly, lifting his gaze once more toward her throne, the queen understood something deeper, something far more terrifying than defeat. He was not trying to survive. He was trying to make sure no one ever forgot. He raised the rock high into the air, not in triumph, not in challenge, but in reminder. The camera drones zoomed in, catching every detail, the blood, the scars, the fraying chain, the fire in his eyes. And across the stars, a new fear took root, not of armies, not of fleets, not of weapons, but of one human, alone, wounded, smiling, and still fighting. The queen staggered back from the glass, the strength in her limbs draining as if the gravity of Solkarth itself had doubled. She barely heard the screams of her advisors, barely noticed the frantic signals from commanders demanding orders, because none of it mattered anymore. The human had changed the arena. He had changed her. The maul, her ultimate weapon, lay crumpled and sparking, half buried in the sand. Around its broken body, a widening circle of silence spread like a shockwave, swallowing the rage and bloodlust that had once filled the air. The spectators sat frozen, their mouths agape, their fists unclenched. The announcers fell mute. The palace feeds, broadcasting across 8 systems, played the footage on endless loop, a barefoot, bloodied man bringing down a god of war with nothing but stone and chain. And everywhere the same thought bloomed. If one man could do this, what could the others do? The queen gripped the throne's rail so tightly that the edge cracked under her fingers. No, it could not end like this. It would not. She snapped her fingers, summoning the execution drones, sleek machines designed for one thing: finality. A dozen black ovals descended from the rafters, fanning out like a murder of crows, targeting lasers converging on the human's chest. He did not flinch. He did not run. He simply turned, the bloody rock still in his hand, and waited. One drone surged forward. A hum of energy filled the arena, charging to fire. He moved, not away, toward it. Chains rattling like an ancient war drum, he leapt, higher and faster than anyone burdened with his wounds should have been able to. His body crashed into the first drone, the shattered edge of the rock slicing into delicate machinery with brutal precision. The drone spasmed midair, sparks vomiting from its core, and spiraled into the sand. The others recalibrated instantly, weapons locking. But the human was already moving. He used the wreckage of the first drone like a springboard, launching himself toward the next. Another slice. Another fall of burning wreckage. The queen stumbled back, horror twisting her perfect features into something raw and ugly. He was dismantling them, piece by piece, breath by breath. By the time the fourth drone exploded in midair, showers of molten metal raining down on the sands, panic erupted through the royal gallery. Nobles fled the observation decks. Servants dropped their trays and ran. Even her generals, bred and trained to die at her command, hesitated, because they all saw it now, clear as the stars beyond the cracked dome. This was not an execution. This was a funeral, and the body was not the human's. It was the queen's authority. She clutched her chest, feeling her heart thunder against ribs suddenly too fragile to hold it. Around her, the feeds kept playing, over and over. The human, the stone, the shattered maul, the falling drones. It was a virus now, a wildfire racing across the comnets, across the colonies, across the stars. A new anthem whispered from mouth to mouth, screen to screen. They brought armies. He brought a rock. And he won. The last 2 drones tried to retreat, fleeing the impossible. The human hurled the chain like a whip, catching one by a stabilizer vein and yanking it into the sand with a shriek of torn metal. The final drone veered wildly, but he leapt, with the last reserves of a body long past broken, smashing it from the sky with a 2-handed swing of stone and chain. It exploded in a sunburst of shattered steel. The arena, once a place of imperial pride, now lay silent and broken. And at its center, the human stood, barefoot, breathing, free. The queen fell back into her throne, chest heaving, mind reeling. She knew then that she had lost. Not today, not tomorrow, but inevitably. Because even if she killed him now, even if she unleashed every weapon left in her arsenals, it would not matter. The story was already written. Across the galaxy, seeds had been sown in blood and defiance. A barefoot human, half dead, raising a rock higher than any crown. She reached for her scepter, the ancient symbol of her rule, hands trembling so violently she could barely lift it. What could a scepter command now? What empire could stand against the memory of this moment? And worse, How could she ever unsee the truth burning in that human's eyes? It wasn't anger. It wasn't even hatred. It was freedom. The kind of freedom that cannot be chained. The kind of freedom that infects every soul that glimpses it and makes them wonder if they, too, could stand up and survive the impossible. The kind that breaks empires not with wars, but with whispers. The human stepped forward, one slow, dragging step after another, leaving bloody footprints across the bones of her dreams. He stopped at the base of the throne, chain swinging loosely from his wrist, stone glinting in the dying light. He looked up at her and smiled, the same cracked, bloodied, unstoppable smile that had shattered her world. Then, with deliberate care, he dropped the rock onto the first step of the dais. It struck stone with a sound that echoed through the ruined arena louder than any war horn. A sound like the ending of gods. The queen could not speak, could not move. She could only watch as the human turned his back to her. Walked away, broken, bleeding, victorious. He walked through the broken gates of the arena, as if nothing and no one could stop him. And the truth was, they couldn't. Not now. Not anymore. Behind him, the arena smoldered in silence, a graveyard of broken warriors, shattered machines, and a throne that had lost all meaning. The queen remained seated, paralyzed, her heart hammering against the inside of her ribs as if it could flee where her body could not. Two statistic spectators made no sound as the human disappeared into the tunnels. No one dared block his path. Not the guards. Not the elite sentinels. Not even the autonomous kill systems, which stood idle, their targeting arrays blind to the man who had just unmade a dynasty with nothing but rage, blood, and stone. The human limped through the inner halls of the palace complex, leaving footprints of blood across the polished crystal floors, across the ancient carpets woven from the silk of dying stars, across the gold inlays designed to impress lesser species. Everywhere he passed, silence bloomed. Nobles pressed themselves into alcoves. Advisors hid behind shattered pillars. Even battle-hardened generals, men and women who had slaughtered whole continents without blinking, averted their eyes. Because in him they saw it. The end of certainty. The end of control. The end of the lie they had built their world upon. He reached the Grand Hall, a corridor stretching 2 miles from the arena to the royal spaceports, and paused at its threshold. Above him, the banners of conquest still hung. The red banner of Telari victory at Orion's bastion, the black banner of the subjugation of Vex'tulia, the silver banner of the drowning of Xerath. Victories carved into history through blood and fire. He reached up, fingers trembling from exhaustion and wounds that would kill any lesser creature, and tore the banners down one by one. Not in rage, not in triumph, but as a statement. A single human, wounded and unarmed, stripping away the symbols of an empire brick by crumbling brick, tearing away illusions. With each fallen banner, another pillar of the queen's reign cracked. In the side chambers, broadcast feeds continued streaming the spectacle, now utterly beyond the queen's control. Across the stars, worlds watched. Worlds that had once knelt in fear. Worlds that had paid tribute in blood and treasure. Now they watched a single man, broken but unbent, remind them that no empire is invincible. In the lower streets of Sulkarth, riots ignited. At first small, sparks thrown from the friction of disbelief. But within hours, whole sectors burned. Symbols of the ascendancy were ripped from buildings, statues toppled, governors dragged from their palaces. And through it all, a chant spread like wildfire. One man, one chain, one rock. By the time the queen's internal security forces managed to seal the palace gates, it was too late. The people had already made their choice. Not with elections, not with revolutions, with belief, with memory. Across the 7 systems of the Telari ascendancy, broadcasts looped the footage. The human standing over the broken mall. The human breaking the chain of the execution drones. The human tearing down the banners. And most damning of all, the queen, frozen in her throne, watching helplessly. The collapse wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single event. It was a slow, inevitable unraveling. Governors declared autonomy. Military fleets swore loyalty to local councils. Supply chains fractured. Old rivalries, once suppressed under Telari rule, ignited again. And the queen? She sat alone in her shattered palace, the crown slipping from her brow, listening to the silence of a dynasty dying breath by breath. Her throne, once capable of commanding worlds to burn, could not even summon a single loyal bodyguard. Because they remembered. They all remembered. The moment the human raised the rock. The moment the gods bled. And memory was sharper than any blade. It traveled faster than any starship. It hit harder than any plasma cannon. It toppled towers more surely than any rebellion. Within a standard month, the Telari ascendancy, which had ruled unchallenged for 5 centuries, ceased to exist. Its system splintered into independent republics, matriarchies, federations. Some fell into chaos. Some built something better. But none rebuilt the empire. Because empires can survive wars. They can survive assassinations. They can survive betrayal. But they cannot survive humiliation burned into memory. The human's name became a ghost story whispered in the halls of new rulers. An omen. A reminder. He never claimed a crown. Never built a throne. He simply kept walking. And everywhere his story spread, people understood a truth deeper than any law. You do not humiliate those who endure. Because endurance has a memory longer than any empire. And vengeance has a patience stronger than any crown. He disappeared after Solkarth fell. No one saw where he went. No broadcast caught his trail. No spies reported sightings. He simply vanished. But his absence was louder than any speech he could have given. Because he had never needed words. The galaxy already carried his message in every shattered banner, every fallen crown, every memory burned into the hearts of those who once believed themselves immortal. He became a myth so quickly it frightened even the ones who claimed to no longer believe in myths. On Pharos, when a governor tried to reinstate old tribute taxes, someone painted a single chain across the steps of his palace. He resigned the next morning. On Zereth Prime, when a new queen raised her voice in fury against the sinners, an anonymous hand placed a stone, blood-red and rough-edged, at the foot of her throne. She abdicated within a week. And across 1,000 colonies, a simple phrase entered common speech. The rock still watches. Children learned it before they learned to read. Soldiers whispered it in barracks before they marched. Politicians carved it discreetly into the undersides of their desks. It was not a threat. It was a memory. And memory, once awakened, never sleeps again. In the great academic halls of rebuilt Irica, historians argued for decades over what to call the event. Some called it the fall of the ascendancy. Some called it the reckoning of Solkarth. The boldest called it simply the day the chain broke. But among the people, those who truly understood, it was remembered in simpler terms. The day a human refused to kneel. Decades passed. Old empires crumbled. New alliances rose. Wars raged and faded like tides. Yet the story endured. In backwater trading posts orbiting dying suns, storytellers spun it for a bowl of soup and a warm place to sleep. In glittering city worlds where rulers wore crowns of neural gold, it was retold in shadowed corners with trembling voices. In refugee camps built from the bones of forgotten wars. It was sung like a hymn to the stubbornness of survival. And somewhere, in the unmapped dark between systems, far beyond the reach of any broadcast, a man still walked. Scarred. Silent. Carrying nothing but the chain wrapped around his wrist and the memory of a stone dropped at the feet of a queen who thought herself untouchable. Some said he aged like any man. Some said he became something else. A force, a myth stitched into the fabric of time itself. But those were just details. The truth was simpler. He had not fought for conquest. He had not bled for a throne. He had not survived for glory. He had done it for the oldest, simplest reason of all. Because someone thought they could break him. Because someone thought pain could erase defiance. Because someone believed the humiliation of one man would never echo across the stars. They were wrong. Pain does not erase defiance. It writes it into stone. And humiliation, when witnessed by enough eyes, does not weaken a people. It hardens them. It sharpens them. It teaches them that survival is not enough. That memory is not enough. That sometimes, just sometimes, one broken human with nothing left to lose can topple 1,000 thrones with nothing but his will. No empire ever dared laugh at a human again. Because they remembered Solkarth. They remembered the stone. They remembered the chain. And they remembered him. The man who walked barefoot through blood and dust, who bled and fought and smiled when kings trembled, who showed them all that the human spirit, once cornered, is not a flame to be extinguished. It is a wildfire waiting to burn down the world.